Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, and we have the great honor of the return of the wanderer, Pepe Escobar, who's a big favorite of gagglers. Are always demanding, "When's Pepe coming back?" So we have
same
Pepe.
thing with crosstalk, right?
Exactly. So Pepe, I mean,
thank you, guys.
Okay, I was planning to kick off the discussion about Gaza and about Ukraine, but the big news is the election in Argentina and this extraordinary landslide victory by Javier Milei, who seemed to can't come from nowhere, is an outsider. Naturally, the media describe him as far right. I mean, everybody that media don't like, they describe as far right. Mm-hmm. And obviously, we want some, information about him. I mean, he seems like obviously a kind of a self-identified Trumpian figure. Trump has already congratulated him and said, mm-hmm. "You will make Argentina great again." And he's described as a kind of libertarian populist. He has some libertarian social views, some not so libertarian, but he's a libertarian on economics. I mean, he wants to abolish the central bank. He wants to, go from the peso to the dollar, make the dollar the reserve, the currency of Argentina, and he doesn't seem to want to join BRICS starting January the 1st of this year. So. Pepe, just tell us.
Pepe, I have a quick question on the back end of George's.
Of course. Go ahead.
Is his most, looking into the future and looking at what his possible legacy is his most important high point legacy is that he got elected? Meaning, is it all downhill from here?
It is all. Guys, well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure to be with you.
Always a pleasure.
I'll be back in Moscow next week, in fact. So at the moment, I am
bring a heavy jacket. It's already really
I know
cold.
I'm looking every day, and it's really hardcore. Yeah, I know that. And well, for the moment, I am in NATO stan, as you know, in Paris, former great capital of the planet, now a dump essentially. Well, look, I'm very, very dejected today. The day I'm talking to you guys, it's the day after the election of Milei. We knew it will happen. Apparently, the Lula government in Brazil and the extremely mediocre people around Lula, they didn't know that a few months ago, at the time when Lula made express point to bring Argentina into BRICS. They should have had ground intel on the possible victor of Milei, and obviously they didn't.
Well, I thought he was going to win. George, you thought he was
exactly.
going to win.
Everybody
Pepe, you
knew.
Thought he was going to win.
I mean,
exactly,
Tucker Carlson
everybody knew he was going to win,
right.
Except the Workers' Party in Brazil. And that tells you everything about the people around Lula. Well, okay. So we are all dejected, of course. Myself, personally, I am a big Argentina fan. Unlike most Brazilians, I have been going to Argentina since I was a kid. I traveled the country from Tierra del Fuego to the Bolivian border. I used to go to Buenos Aires a lot. I have very good Argentinian friends. Some of my favorite writers in the world are Argentinians, starting with Borges. So obviously, all of us, we are floored, expected, of course. Well, this was very, very important for all of you, our global audience. This was part of a two-pronged strategy by the hegemon. This is extremely important. Never forget that the Argentinian oligarchy is one of the most nefarious on the planet. Really, we're talking about mega toxic material, like Macri, the former president. Guess who's the godfather of Milei politically? Macri. So the cabinet is going to be a Macri 2.0 cabinet. Starts with that. Second,
so could you just tell people who may not know, I mean, who Macri is?
Macri is one of the top 20, top 30 exponents of the Argentinian oligarchy, concentrated basically in Buenos Aires. He is the former president, very, very close to Trump, if many of you remember. He was already basically preaching and trying to introduce all these so-called reforms that Milei is like an Argentinian version of the Texas chainsaw massacre is being talking about for months now. Dollarization, of course, because this is perfect for the Argentinian oligarchy. All their money is in dollars. So obviously dollarization for them is manna from heaven. Dollarization is perfect from the hegemon because the IMF is going to be even more not involved running the Argentina. The Argentinian economy under Milei is going to be run directly from the IMF in Washington.
And what does that explain what that means?
It means that every American oligarch and every American corporation who wants to go to Argentina and buy Argentina assets for a penny will do that. Well, a great deal of the country is already sold, as we know, including Patagonia, which is one of the most extraordinary semi-virgin areas on the planet. When I was in Patagonia, to give you an idea, when I was in Patagonia in 2010, was after the World Cup, I crossed it back to back. And I got local information from people who were living in the southern provinces, including the province that was controlled by the Kirchners, that American corporations and American oligarchs especially had already bought immense amounts of land in Argentina, including our friend Ted Turner, by the way. I went to Ted Turner's lake near Bariloche. It's not Ted Turner's lake. He has an enormous amount of land with a beautiful Himalaya-style lake in the middle. Of course, I could not go inside because I was prevented. But I did a circumambulation of the lake. And that area in itself is like, if it was in the US, it would be a protected natural park or anywhere in the West. It belongs to Ted Turner himself.
Is that the value of it? It's just because of its the scenery that it's
many reasons, Peter. The scenery, of course, is absolutely outstanding. The value of the land itself, and of course, refuge if anything nuclear happens in the global north. Where do you go? You go to pristine Patagonia.
That's what I was going to get at.
As you can also choose to go to pristine New Zealand. So in South America, the preferred place to go is Patagonia. So between, I would say at the time, this was 2010, between 10 and 12% of Patagonia already belonged to foreign interests. You can imagine that under Milei, assuming he has his full term, right? So this is one of the reasons. And of course, in terms of imploding BRICS 11, manna from heaven. So this was part of the original hegemon two-pronged strategy. The other part of the strategy is to set fire in West Asia. We all know what that means. So this was a two-pronged strategy between West Asia and South America. We can say that they had a major tactical victory in South America with the election of Milei, because it turns Argentina into a full-fledged American colony, and also very important, Zionist colony as well.
But
and
sorry,
it breaks BRICS from the inside. Go ahead, George.
No, I was just going to ask. I mean, everything you're saying makes sense, but I mean, 56% of Argentines voted for him. How do you explain that? I mean, that's a
yeah, but I think that's what I'm getting at with my first question. Okay, because is it more of a protest of a failed system that fails to deliver on working class people, poor people? Is it more of a protest than anything else? Because that's why I asked my first question is, first of all, if you want to dollarize the economy, well, that's an ambition. You need a hell of a lot of dollars to even start doing something like that.
But, to answer you guys' overall question, the number one reason was an inflation that officially it was 156, 160%, but Argentinians on the street, like Turks who go to the market to buy their groceries, Argentinians who go to the market to buy their groceries, and not necessarily in Buenos Aires, the real inflation is over 200 to 250% or even more. So this
and
is
if you
and
sorry,
they blame
if
the
you're going to
government
start moving towards dollarization, it could kick in hyperinflation even before you get there.
Yes, but but the people who go to buy their tomatoes, they don't make that kind of connection, Peter. That's the thing. So the way that the propaganda, the very refined propaganda campaign of the Milei camp, they sold it. This government is a bunch of incompetence, and it's thanks to these guys in power in Buenos Aires that you have this inflation rate. I'm going to break it all. I'm going to break the central bank. I'm going to break the peso. That's it. And obviously, if you are in the middle of, okay, I'll give you an example. Salta province in the north near the Bolivian border, where you have this beautiful canyon scenery, but it's basically a wasteland. There's not much happening over there. For the local people, they could buy that thing easily. They are not reading, for instance, the Argentinian financial press or even the world press trying to explain why Argentina has a high inflation rate. And distrust of government, absolutely, because the populist themes du jour or the week of the year, all reproduced by the Milei campaign. So they were very, very competent to win. And obviously, the people behind Massa, the current government, finance minister, they didn't have a decent counter campaign. And of course, when they were making the approximation, this current government is supported by Lula. So immediately they create the idea, this is a communist thing and the Brazilians are involved. A lot of people in Argentina still buy that, And of course, they never explained the Milei campaign. They never explained their attack against, which they plan to do, against the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health.
Yeah.
This was all in the air in terms of we're going to fight corruption.
Yeah. He had an amazing video where I saw where he had all of the cabinet names.
Exactly, and
he tore them off, tore them off.
Right. But then he also he
went viral in Argentina.
But he walked back those things towards the end of the campaign. He said he didn't really mean that he was going to get rid of education. He wasn't going to privatize education. He wasn't going to privatize health. So he said this. And just like he wasn't going to endorse the trafficking in human organs. So he did kind of walk back those promises towards the end of his campaign.
Of course, because this was a very catchy way to catch people's attention, of course. And most people with a little bit of a working brain know that this is unfeasible, cannot possibly. The same thing as he actually said that on the record. I'm going to cut off relations with Brazil. This is a fucking joke. It's their top. This is their top trade partner. You cannot do that, So it's just like any one of the ASEAN nations. We're going to cut off our relations with China. It's their major trade partner. So it's going to be fascinating to see the first few weeks of this government, especially in terms of BRICS. Putin already congratulated, of course, this is Minister of Foreign Relations, head-to-head of state. It's a procedure. Lula as well, procedure. But there are two possibilities for Argentina inside BRICS. Number one, they are completely sidelined, which is probably what the Russians and the Chinese would do. Number two, you don't want to join, no problem at all. We invited you. You don't want to come, no problem. And then at the next BRICS summit in Russia next year, they invite Venezuela, for instance, which would be a much more, I would say, on-the-job representative of South America. So Argentina will be isolating themselves, not only in terms of the trend in South America, but even inside BRICS 11. So for all practical purposes, now we have BRICS 10. And the Russians and the Chinese know it very well.
What is the possibility he could change his mind between now and next year?
Right.
Because George pointed out, at the last few weeks, he changed his mind on so many things.
And the same
because he doesn't believe in anything.
Because if you recall, Bolsonaro was also talking, big game, away from BRICS, and he was moved towards the Americans. But Bolsonaro didn't really change the policy.
Guys, can I give you? You're going to think that I'm joking, but the answer to your question, it depends on the advice that he gets from Conan. Do you know who Conan is? His dead dog. It's his guru. I am not making this up. There is a fantastic, I tweeted that, it's in Spanish. I didn't have time to translate it. There is a fantastic article on Página 12. It's one of the best Argentinian daily newspapers. They are center-left, essentially. But they give you the background, the education, and teenage traumas of Milei, and it is absolutely outstanding. And basically, it's a fact that Conan, the dead dog, has always been the #1 entity in his life, and he receives advice from the ghost of Conan. So we should ask the ghost of Conan what's going to happen with the Milei government. Can you believe this?
Well,
I didn't until I read this report in detail, and it's a very, very serious report, you know.
But Pepe, we know what he campaigned on, and in a very savvy way. I
Yes.
think if you're really pissed off with the status quo, you're going to do something like that.
Exactly.
It's 2016 all over again.
All over again.
However, Trump wasn't really allowed to rule, okay? And the election was rigged against him in 2020. So,
Yes.
I mean, what we could get in Argentina is just how many years is his term? Is it 4 years?
4. But the difference, Peter, it's a very good question. The difference is the Argentinian oligarchy is totally behind him. Don't forget that the number 3 in the first round, the number 3 candidate was Patricia Bullrich. To give you an idea to all of you guys, the Bullrich are, I would say, among the top 3 wealthiest families in Argentina. This is Argentinian oligarchy written, you know, like this, graphically. The Bullrich. If you are in Buenos Aires and you mention the Bullrich, means that you are in. If you know people from the Bullrich family, you are in. If you go to their mega shopping mall in Buenos Aires, you are in. That's it. And obviously, they had an agreement with Macri. Okay, Patricia wants to run as well. Let's see what happens. So it was in the first round, it was Milei first, Massa second, and Bullrich third. For the second round, there was an agreement broken by Macri between Milei and Bullrich. So what we're going to see in the cabinet is a mix of Mileistas and the Bullrich proteges of the Bullrich family. That's the difference between Argentina and the US.
One thing,
full oligarchy behind him.
right? You say the oligarchy is behind him, but then pretty much since 1983, the Peronists have been in power. So I mean,
Yes.
he is breaking the stranglehold of the Peronists. So it's very strange for the
Except for
to be
men
behind
and
him.
George. Don't forget the men in government in the late 90s.
But he was also a Peronist.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
Definitely not. You know, in practice,
In
definitely
practice, his policies were libertarian, but he was a Peronist. I mean, he was part of the Peronist party.
But the problem is, after the Kirchners, it's very, very complicated because the Kirchners, they had some, let's say they had some positive aspects in terms of social equality. But if you went to their province, which is in the middle of Patagonia, and you saw how they controlled this province and everything was subjugated by their financial economic power and a lot of corruption, including, for instance, a mega casino for all sorts of gangsters in the most beautiful place that you go when you want to do mountain climbing and skiing in Patagonia. Everything owned by the Kirchners and their proteges, you know. Then you understand that, basically it's a bunch of gangsters. That's the problem. And a lot of people outside in Buenos Aires, because they saw the Kirchners as, okay, these are interlopers from the south, you know, these are provincials. So obviously that created a lot of blowback against the Kirchners and against the left as well, against center left and against Peronism. And another interesting point, Milei did not win in the greater Buenos Aires region. This is still a Peronista region. And that includes the football people. You know, he says, I am a Boca Juniors fan, but most of the Boca Juniors are working class people. They did not vote for him.
That's interesting.
As they don't vote for oligarchs. You know, the River Plate fans, River Plate is basically the upper middle class and aristocracy in Buenos Aires. They voted for Milei. You know, it's very interesting. You can understand Argentina. If you don't understand football, you don't understand Argentina. It's very, very important. But yes, a backlash against Peronism. To answer,
but Pepe, I
no
mean,
question.
is he's going to succeed? I mean,
We
I
don't
think,
know.
There's something.
I don't see it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very much up in the air.
Yes.
But since you said that the quote unquote oligarchy is behind him, that's a whole lot better than Trump had. Okay.
Much better, exactly, much better. And the thing is, in terms of Argentinian finances, if everything is controlled by the IMF, this is going to be a third-rate colony of the IMF starting next year already. So forget about what Massa was trying to do. Massa's idea, okay, as soon as we entered the BRICS in January 1st, we go to the NDB, the New Development Bank in Shanghai, and we ask for a big loan. And the Chinese are going to say yes, because obviously there were already consultations with the Chinese. Yes, that will be, let's say, a way out short and midterm for Argentina. At least they could pay their bills with a huge yuan loan via the NDB. Now forget it. Now you are an IMF colony.
Okay.
Yeah?
I don't think that train has left the station yet. We'll see. Because
Not
Bolsonaro,
yet. Yes, true.
Because I remember Tucker Carlson had his interview with Bolsonaro,
and he loved it. Tucker loved him.
Yeah, well, Bolsonaro loved him. But, and there was this talk about the influence of China. Well, that did not change. China's influence only increased under Bolsonaro. It did not dissipate. Okay.
But you know the difference, Peter? Excellent question. The trade volumes between Brazil and China are much, much higher than China-Argentina.
Okay.
So the key partner for China in Latin America is Brazil. Argentina is a distant second because of agriculture, of course. But in terms of hardcore partnership in every area, including manufactured products, industrial products, etc., is Brazil. So for Argentina, China is much more focused on Brazil than on Argentina. If they lose Argentina, okay, they can agriculture. Okay, maybe we can compensate with Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan. We don't need Argentina.
Well, it's interesting that you say that Argentina is risking. I think isolation is a big word here, but I mean it's certainly not in lockstep with the developing world, the quote unquote global South. So that's an interesting trend. I mean, if it comes to pass.
In fact, this is crucial because at the start of our conversation, I mentioned a huge tactical victory by the Americans. It's enormous. They managed to break the Brazilian-Argentina very, very close connection, and they managed to infiltrate BRICS from the inside, assuming Argentina continues on BRICS. So this is a major tactical victory. They achieved it for the moment, as you said very appropriately. We don't know what's going to happen, but for the moment, it's a major win.
George, you want to mix it up with another topic here?
No, before then, I want to go back to this thing with the IMF.
Okay.
Yes,
because Argentina is in, it's got a huge debt. I mean, he needs to service that debt.
Unpayable, exactly.
Yeah. Now there is a big problem with when you go to the IMF, which is that the moment the IMF makes its recommendations, and we know what those recommendations invariably are: privatization, devaluation,
structural adjustment.
Exactly, structural adjustment.
Well, all called conditionality.
Conditionality.
That's right.
Yes.
That's the fastest way to lose popular support. I mean, you're going to be out on your ass, within a few months if you start signing on to any of these IMF packages. So how is Milei going to sort that out?
We don't know. He bills himself as being an economist. Apparently, he has a degree. There's something even better than that. He is one of Klaus Schwab's young leaders. So he has direct endorsement by the Davos gang. It's one of them. This is extremely important. So if he is in dire straits, these people will go to Buenos Aires and help him. There's no question.
I guess then
that.
they'll stop calling him far right. No, it'll go from fall right to all right.
All right.
All right, so Pepe, let's then switch topics and let's go to the Middle East. But I know you don't like calling it the Middle East. You want to call it West Asia.
Sorry, we call it West Asia.
I'm beginning to I'm warming up to that. I'm definitely warming up to it because the Middle East is what the imperial powers called it. Okay, that's their term. Okay,
it's an Orientalist.
It's an Orientalist
concept.
term. Yeah.
It was invented by the British Empire, by the way, and then picked up by the Americans. So we are very, very serious about that. And I write for the Cradle based in Beirut, and we discussed this from the beginning. We're going to call it West Asia, and in that particular area, Southwest Asia, which is the equivalent of Southeast Asia. This is Southwest Asia. Just look at the map. It's very simple. Okay.
So when it comes to Southwest Asia, what do you think? What do you think is the let's say, you know, in the short term, what do you expect to happen, and then we'll go on to the medium and the long term. What's your
the answer to your question would take us 5 hours.
All right. Well, we don't have 5 hours.
This is what I always say in my podcasts, you know. But okay, let's try to see a ray of light in the middle of the black void. The ray of light is happening as we speak, in fact. It's this foreign ministry delegation of the Organization of the Islamic Conference and the Arabs. And their first stop, they are on tour. Now, they started a tour this Monday. And their first stop was Beijing.
Yep.
So they sat down with Wang Yi, very, very important. So you see Wang Yi and all of them. And they are discussing their common strategy on trying to bring a ceasefire in Palestine. And of course, the second step is let's start serious negotiations about a Palestinian state. My first reaction, to tell you, I'm being very frank with you. My first reaction when I saw the composition of the delegation, I said, okay, this sucks. Where is Iran? Where is Turkey? Where is Qatar? And then I got my answer. The Egyptians were the bridge. So the Egyptians were talking to the Chinese, look, we want to organize a delegation, and the first stop is going to be with you guys in China. So they coordinated first with Qatar and Iran and Turkey as well. And then the Egyptians are representing these three alongside Saudi Arabia, which is let's say, the nominal leader of the delegation. He was the first guy who stepped out of the plane. Then you see who the leader is. He is the foreign minister of Saudi Arabia. So this points, if we are not mistaken, this points to a high level and deep coordination with all of them, with the major Islamic nations, with the top Arabs represented by Saudi Arabia and the Chinese. And guess who's the second stop? Lavrov in Moscow. So this seems to be very, very serious. We don't know the practical results yet. Are they going to come up with a common position, a statement, some hardcore pressure, whatever, which obviously the Americans are going to say, we don't give a fuck.
That's right.
Or this is going to be like what it was actually when we saw the meeting in Riyadh of the OIC and the Arabs with that stupid final declaration that we read, and it's a blah, blah, blah thing, you know. So we still don't know. But maybe this could be a ray of light in the middle of the black hole.
Well,
I would love to have your opinion, guys, on this.
Well, if anything, I think it's an interesting and important initiative here. But what they can achieve, if anything is achievable at this point, is that they at least take a stand. Okay, at least they make it very clear that what has been happening for the last 75 years has failed. The Chinese want to be on the right side of history. But China has been very tepid during all of this, and so has Russia, to be honest. Okay.
To be honest, I agree.
Yeah, to be honest. But I mean, it's an important step. You know, George and I have on this podcast, and we've talked with others, is BRICS, the global South. I mean, both good, really good things, but they don't have a punch. They can't punch at their weight. Okay. And just another declaration isn't going to help the Palestinians. Now, what they can do is, and what I think could be important, is to have a juxtaposition. Say, look, the Americans wanted this. They have utterly failed. They have utterly screwed this thing up. I mean, they're allowing genocide. Okay. Now we have a different plan. We're going to bring it to the United Nations. We know in the Security Council, the Americans are going to veto it, but we have a coalition, a real coalition, and we're going to start making real, practical, tangible moves. Now, if they do that, then I would give them a hat tip. But if it's just going to be just another, free Palestine. Okay.
Yes.
But that's really the point, that ultimately they are only in a position to make statements. Now, for instance, one of the things that could have come out of that recent summit, the Arab League summit and the Organization of Islamic Countries summit, is an oil embargo. They could have said this is an oil embargo against Israel. I mean, it wouldn't have brought Israel to its knees, but it would have been something. That would have been an effective stance. But they said no. So if you say no to actually doing anything practical, then it is ultimately, yeah, you can come along with these fine statements, two-state solution and everything, but we've already known that's the consensus view of the international community. There's nothing new about that. What we know also is it hasn't come about because Israel doesn't want it to come about, and the United States supports Israel in not wanting it to come about. So we're still back to the same position as we were.
And on the oil angle, guys, I got an excellent confirmation from a surefire source. I cannot, obviously for obvious reasons, I cannot say where from. Let's say it's a mix of West and GCC, but I cannot tell you where it comes from. And it's surefire confirmation. The Turks were terrified that if they imposed an oil embargo, they were terrified of the consequences. So this is the number one. It's not only Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, which obviously they vetoed the idea, but there was a strong possibility that the Turks would do it from their angle, because the oil that goes to Israel is from the BTC, Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline. So it starts in Azerbaijan, crosses Georgia, gets to Ceyhan in the Mediterranean, and then it goes by tankers to Ashkelon in Israel. 40% of Israel's oil. So Erdogan with a phone call could say, no more tankers leaving Ceyhan. He could do that easily. And even under pressure from these diplomatic entanglements, let's put it this way, they said, no, we cannot do this because we know the American response. They were not even talking about the Israeli response. We can do it now, of course, and they don't have enough leverage to do something like that. This is practically a declaration of war against Israel, so they didn't dare. And Emirates and Saudi Arabia, we all know they play double games all the time, so nobody was fooled.
Right. The Turks were afraid. What did they think the Americans would do?
You name it. An embargo, tons of sanctions, even worse than against Russia, destroying the lira, which is already destroyed, by the way. Every time that I go to Istanbul, the lira is 10 points lower. It's amazing. It's amazing. The currency is completely destroyed, and the actual inflation in Turkey is over 200%. Is similar to the Argentinian inflation, in fact. So, and Erdogan, as we all know, is rhetoric. He will never do something, I would say, Houthi Ansarullah style. These are the badass motherfuckers. They go there and they apprehend a ship, and they know that the ship is Israeli. Now we already know the whole thing about this ship. It's sailing through a Japanese company. It's insured by the Brits, but the real owner is an Israeli tycoon directly linked to the Mossad and directly linked to one of their top think tanks. So, you know, these are the real badasses. Erdogan will never be a Houthi.
Well,
because,
I mean,
because his internal dynamic, just 30 seconds, guys. His internal dynamics is the people surrounding him, especially this, what we call the Gang of Five, the mafia, the real estate land speculation mafia that basically supports him in power. These are his interests. And he's obviously a tin pot Islamist, you know, a rhetorical Islamist, not a real hardcore kind of guy.
Well, but, you know, as we all can watch the very vivid, oh, this is International Children's Day, by the way. Yeah. Wow. Wow. You know, it's breathtaking watching some of the footage coming out of Gaza. It just
no, but the genocide on every smartphone, I think I would call a minute of silence. None of us would never expect to see this in the 21st century.
Yeah,
None
but see,
of us.
but
Yes.
but you know, Pepe, what makes it, if it's even possible, even worse, is that we all just watch it.
And we just watch it
And we just
completely impotent. Exactly. And even worse, we know what we're watching. We know this is beyond anything that can remotely be connected with humanity. And worse, we know that they can get away with it. That's even worse. And we see that nobody's actually doing anything practical apart from the axis of resistance and apart from the badasses from Yemen against it.
Well, the way things are going, Pepe,
Yeah.
and of course this is, you know, this is wide open. So many things could happen, but the axis of resistance are going to looking pretty flaccid at this moment in time. You know, and
yes.
and there will be consequences for that.
There will be
forward.
consequences for them, but
I'm not calling for a general war. I'm not calling for a general war.
Allow me another mini ray of light, if I may. They are not totally involved yet. I know they don't have the firepower that Israeli have, not to mention the empire. But these attacks against American bases in Iraq, it's already big and they will keep going. And the Iranians in the background are supporting them. All the Hashd al-Shabi people, Kataib, Hezbollah. I met the Hashd al-Shabi people in Baghdad years ago, and these are badass motherfuckers as well. And of course, if they had, I would say 50% more firepower than they have, these American bases would be already destroyed by now, but they don't. And of course, Hezbollah is playing a death by 1,000 cuts strategy, which is Nasrallah. Nasrallah is a sort of a Shiite Sun Tzu. Very, very smart. And the guys around him, the Hezbollah think tank in Beirut, these are ultra qualified, high-level people, you know.
Yeah, but Pepe,
the guys who advise him, you know, and they know that he cannot throw Lebanon as a whole into this war because he knows that Lebanon would be devastated. And Nasrallah is not only thinking about those populations living in the margin, in the border between southern Lebanon and occupied Palestine on the other side, and the Syrian border as well, the tri-border over there. I travel in this area, and it's contiguous. If you are on a point at the end of southern Lebanon, you look at the left, you see Syrian hills. You are on southern Lebanon, and if you look across the wall, is occupied Palestine. So the villages there are in the front lines over there. Of course, he's thinking about them, but he's also thinking about Lebanon as a whole. And he knows that Israelis, they go on a Samson crazy shit, and they can destroy the whole of Lebanon.
Yeah, but you know, you use the metaphor death by 1,000 cuts, but that could happen to Hamas as well with this strategy.
Yes, it can happen to Hamas, but okay, I'm gonna be existential here. The spirit of the resistance it will live. They
So
can
that,
kill,
yeah.
even
So
if they
that's
kill,
what- yeah.
even if they kill 2 million people, but the spirit of the resistance will be there. And those kids that survived the current genocide, when they grow up, just wait.
Well, that goes really to the question of
Yeah.
what is Israel planning on? Because
They don't have a plan, George.
well, that's
Excellent
what I mean.
question.
Is that
Because they don't have
Netanyahu-
a strategy.
Exactly, they don't have a plan. Ultimately,
No.
it's Netanyahu is now basically waging revenge. I mean, he wants revenge for the humiliation of October the 7th.
So,
And
so
well,
this is what we have.
He's trying to save himself as well. I think that's his top priority.
Very, very important. It's a war for his own survival first, and for the survivability of this cabinet peopled with extreme Zionist genocidals. These ministers are, if you look at the minister and you listen to what they say, not to mention the Minister of Defense, they're all genocidals, and they are all in favor of the final solution.
Yeah.
Which is now they have the perfect pretext. So they have this window of opportunity to implement the final solution. They won't have another one like that.
Pepe,
Yes,
what we've been seeing over the last few weeks, we go back to the first major, what's the name of the major, the hospital that was bombed? I mean, really massively bombed. It was like 2 weeks ago. What's happening is we have the Indonesian hospital right now.
Yes, right.
They've normalized it. It's normalized.
It's
now.
normalized.
It's normalized that you
Exactly.
can attack UNRWA schools. It's normalized that you can attack hospitals, and they're just going to go incrementally up the ladder, okay? Because they've already realized they can get away with it.
Yes.
But,
They can
but
show
this
these.
is where it
They
gets
can hang on, George.
Yeah,
They can
right.
show these ridiculous tunnel videos, but I don't know what they mean. Okay, from what I've been told, those tunnels were there when the British were still in Gaza. Okay,
Many of them were, in fact, yes.
But this is really the problem that Israel's window of opportunity, I think, is closing. I mean, clearly, Western public opinion is turning very sharply against Israel in a way that it has never done. Not even at the height of the Lebanon war have I seen Western public opinion really turning on Israel. I mean, they're ridiculing these videos that Israel is releasing about the tunnels. They're being widely ridiculed in the media. I mean, even the New York Times is ridiculing.
Even by kids on TikTok. Have you seen that?
Yes, yes.
It's absolutely outstanding. They lost youth all over the planet.
Right. So the window is closing. They just can't do much more. And even the Biden administration, I mean, they just, they're kind of desperately scrambling around, placating their own base. Well, we're not really supporting. So I think Netanyahu has to bring this to an end quite soon, because otherwise Israel will really become the pariah of the world. I mean, which it has never been.
I don't know, George. This is something that George and I differ on here.
Right.
Okay.
Because I think that they see, this is what makes this so interesting and so scary, because Hezbollah, Hamas, Iran, Yemen, they've been waiting for a moment where they find this amazing synergy. Okay. And Israel, the other side, sees it's within our grasp. It's within our grasp. This 75-year-long struggle, it's within our grasp. We have to embrace it. That's what makes this insane.
That's a loony claim. That's
guys,
a loony claim.
No, George. I'm not trying to be rational here. What I'm trying to see is how
they may
these
see
two
it,
sides,
but you're right.
they see it this way.
Yeah, I agree, but it's still loony. It's not feasible. It's not a practicable achievement. Yeah, I mean, they may well.
They already moved to over 1 million people to the south, George. They're
right.
on their way,
but they're still in Gaza. But anyway,
they're still in Gaza. Guys, allow me another. Oh shit! I don't know why I have so many mini rays of light today, because I think I'm trying to compensate the fact that I'm extremely depressed by the whole thing. Okay, the mini.
Who would have thought Palestine would be oh my God! Anyway,
so the mini ray of light now is General Solimani designed all of that, and he expected the Israelis to fall into his trap. This is the way I prefer to see the whole thing. He took years coordinating the axis of resistance, teaching them basic Sun Tzu and Clausewitz to all of them, all over the place, in Syria, in Iraq, in Lebanon, with the Houthis, Hamas as well, when Hamas was not fighting the Syrian Arab army in Syria. This was also very complicated because then the Iranians and the Syrians had to get Hamas back. And I said, did you see the fuck up you were doing before? Can you see it now? But Soleimani, the guy the architect of everything in terms of the organization of the axis of resistance is Soleimani. And of course, he took into the consideration all the possible responses by Israel, including the current genocidal response. So I'm not trying to defend, I'm not trying to justify anything. I'm just, in strategic terms, I see that Soleimani planned this very, very well. And he planned it to where we are now, where every option from Israel is absolutely terrible.
Yeah,
they
but Pepe,
have no way out, whatever they do.
Well, no. They have a backstop, and it's called nuclear weapons. Okay, Israel will not fail. It will not fail.
No, okay, Peter. I left the nuclear angle outside of this scenario. Of course, the nuclear angle is the Samsung option. It's a completely different thing, which they can use anytime, and we know it. Everybody knows it. The Russians know it. The Chinese know it. Everybody knows it. The thing is, if they use the Samsung option, they will be obliterated as well. And I'm not sure the genocidals want to go 6 feet under. They want to survive, to impose Eretz Israel everywhere else. So I don't think they will use the Samsung option. They, if they have their backs against the wall, it's a completely different story, because we could consider a possibility of the Americans finally saying, the deep state, in fact, finally saying, these people for us, they are a liability. That's it. It stops now. We know this is not going to happen, but this is a possible scenario. Let's put it this way. It's still there.
It's come close in the past. I mean, to the extent, it did come close, but, Ronald Reagan, remember, he got on the phone to Begin and said, enough already, bring this to an end. And this has always been Israel's nightmare, that the Americans are going to say,
that's it. Yes, exactly.
And then America would turn around and join the global coalition and say, that's it. You have to do as we want.
But George, Biden is not Reagan.
No.
Okay.
No, but Biden doesn't. But guys, Biden doesn't exist. I'm thinking in terms of the next elections.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to happen next year, probably. And this massacre could go on for another few months. That's one of the possible scenarios.
I think so too.
Yeah, it's a possible scenario. Nobody knows anything for the moment, but this is a very possible scenario. So this means that the Dems lost the election already. If we have a Trump administration, there might be some sort of American engineered solution, between commas, for all that. But also, we still don't know.
Right. Well, that's still a long way down the road. I mean,
Trump
wouldn't be president until January 2025. That's months away. Yeah.
But that's that just for me, just as I said earlier, everything about this. The intention and actualization of a genocide is being normalized. That's what terrifies me the most. That makes it so much easier to go up the ladder of atrocities. Okay, and I just don't see it. I just don't see this administration in Washington. Not with with Blinken and Sullivan. Okay, fine. We can take Biden out of the equation. That's fine.
The problem is there's no administration, Peter and George. This is a bunch of, I would say, third-rate functions out of their depths. All of them.
But Pepe, Zionism isn't known to be a very intellectual project. Okay, so when you give it to mediocre people with power, this is what you get. This is what you get.
Is like if you had like Robert Kagan as Secretary of State, you could be worried. I agree. But if you had little Blinky, come on, it's a joke, So there's no administration, there's no president, there's no nothing. There's a mutiny inside the State Department. You name it, you know. So they're not going to solve anything. The only thing that they think that they had in their little minds, oh, we managed to change the narrative. No one's talking about Ukraine anymore. So, okay, this is a mini tactical victory.
Well, I don't know if that is a victory for them.
It isn't really, but you know, the
How
recent
small they are, you know.
yeah, but the recent polls, you know, they look at polls. You know, that's what politicians do. They look at polls.
Yeah.
The recent polls say the Democrats have lost the youth vote. The young people are
Totally.
horrified by what they're witnessing in Gaza. You lose the youth vote, you're done. I mean,
You're done.
yeah.
Exactly.
And that's what they look at, and that's when they think, hey, we carry on for a few more months, we're done. You know, we're going to be absolutely obliterated at the next election. And that's why I think it's going to focus their minds that they have to do something, because, you know, otherwise they're facing just political annihilation. And not for Israel. They're not going to do it for Israel. They, you know, this is the thing. You know, I mean, if they're going to face political annihilation, it won't be for Israel.
No, it's for them. It's for their survival, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
So okay, so we're dealing with. Can they come up with a Hail Mary pass in the next 2 months or so? I don't think so.
Pepe, what do you think that they talk about these prisoner exchange, and it may come about. You know, I think the number that's being bandied about is about 50 right
50,
now.
yes.
Yeah, so that's like women and children. I don't know how many Hamas is going to demand of their prisoners. It's a multiple of 3 or 4.
Usually it's an enormous multiple. They have apparently there are 5,000 Palestinian prisoners in Israel, roughly 5,000.
Yeah, right.
So 50, they could ask for the full 5,000.
I doubt that. That's a pretty grim. That's a pretty grim trade if you're being taken out of an Israeli prison and sent to Gaza.
But in the past, we had 1 for 1,000.
Yeah, we did once. Yeah.
We had 1 for 1,000 already. So 50 for 5,000 is not so far-fetched.
I tend to think I'm very cynical, and particularly when it comes to people like Netanyahu, is that I tend to think a lot of those captives, hostages, whatever you want to call them, I think they're probably already dead.
Many of them are. According to Palestinian sources, apparently there was a number floating around. Over 50 were already being killed by the Israeli strikes. So if they had 230, 240, 250, there are less than 200 alive now. And maybe they are not in Gaza anymore. Maybe they were.
I have a question for both of you. I have a question for both of you. First to Pepe. Haaretz newspaper on the last few news cycles is giving us a different look and way to understanding October 7th. Is that, and this is to both of you, is that a way to kind of change the narrative to say face? And I'm looking at the Europeans and the Americans. What do you think, Pepe?
It is, and of course, we don't have full confirmation, but there is rumors and chatter among Israeli journalists, especially, that the casualty figures are enormous on the Israeli side. You remember that guy who was arrested because he was showing the blue body bags on Israeli TV? Apparently, it's much worse than that. There is a number circulating that is almost 3,000 dead.
Yeah, I saw that on Twitter.
Yeah, I saw that. Okay, there's no confirmation from anywhere. Okay. But the fact that this is circulating already and thousands of wounded, wow. If this is true, they must, this might be true. There's one indication. Nothing has happened on the front line in North Gaza this past few days, by the way. The front line is frozen.
Where are the dead Hamas fighters?
Where are the dead Hamas fighters? Apparently, they are not dead Hamas fighters. And this is, and even better, on the border with Lebanon, there are no dead Hezbollah fighters for a few days now. Remember that the Hezbollah was doing a body count every day. 3 here, 4 here, blah, blah, blah. They stopped the body count because no Hezbollah fighters are being killed. So this means that the IDF may be in a serious jam at the moment. And that would explain Haaretz's position.
Right, and I think
That's it's great that you brought Haaretz to the conversation. Yeah.
No, and I think I agree with all of that, and I also think that Haaretz really wants Netanyahu gone. I mean,
no question.
One article and editorial after another, they want him gone, and they blame him personally for the whole fiasco of October the 7th.
Exactly.
And so therefore, I think that they're happy to go with this story just in order just one more way to ensure he's out.
Yeah, but they tend to fact check, George. Haaretz is a relatively serious newspaper, unlike.
I'm sure that's true. I'm sure everything they're writing is true.
Yeah, but I mean, then let's play with this theory. I'm glad, George. I'm glad you both brought this up, because the more we learn about what happened on October 7th, it looks like it was a total fiasco. I mean, absolute fiasco. All right. The rave party ended up being more of an opportunity and not a target.
Yes.
And of course, all of those melted vehicles, well, they weren't melted with AK-47s. Okay, we all know that. Okay,
exactly.
But here's the wrinkle: is that the breach of security, that's Netanyahu's fault. The strategy of the war, that is Netanyahu's fault. We have to get rid of him. That gives them a time to rethink, recalibrate, and just blame the guy in cuffs, because he's going to walk out of his residence into handcuffs once he's no longer prime minister. Is that a feasible strategy?
Look, there's another information that's very, very important. I don't recall now where it came from, but it was a very solid source in Israel. There was a stand-down order by Netanyahu himself of 7 hours on October 7th. This is pretty serious shit.
For what reason? What would be the reason for the stand down?
Because they knew what was happening and they let it.
They wanted a massacre.
They wanted a massacre. Exactly.
I find that theory just difficult to believe, because
I'm just introducing.
I understand.
I'm just introducing it as a.
It's such a humiliation for Israel. I mean, it's seen worldwide.
But
if you
look at the big picture, George, don't forget that the big picture is always the final solution. So somebody had to pay a price for the final solution. They won't have a better opportunity, between commas, to implement the final solution.
That's my position.
Yeah. This is your position. So I think we agree on that. This is the definitive pretext for the final solution, which is exactly what they are doing now.
But you can take my theory as a thread and pull it along. This all happened because of very bad planning. It was something that had a certain logic to it. It was all Benjamin Netanyahu's fault, and he goes to prison. We're off the hook. I mean, I know that sounds far-fetched, okay? But again, we're dealing with people that are absolute fanatics.
Totally. And
but Netanyahu himself isn't. That's the point. I mean, the people in the cabinet.
That's such a good point, George.
It's a very
such
good point.
A good
no,
point.
He's not. He's a cynical opportunist, and he's very, very clever. He's not a strategist, but he knows exactly what he wants, and he can use anything in the book, by the book, off the book, whatever. Yes, but he's not like his interior minister or the minister of defense. Definitely not. Yeah.
Or his Minister of Finance.
His Minister of Finance. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, Pepe, this has always been a fascinating discussion. We didn't even have time to go on to Ukraine. We will.
Oh, yes. Ukraine is another 2 hours.
Exactly. But thank you so much once again.
Thank you,
for
guys.
Giving us your time. Always fascinating. Always, so many stimulating thoughts.
Pepe. It's one of the compliments that I've paid to George over the years, but I will pay it to you. There's very few people that I come across that actually make me think, okay, instead of repeat.
Exactly.
Thank you, guys. It was a real
pleasure.
Thanks for the invite. A real pleasure. And it's a pity that it wasn't such a depressing day like today, but at least we created some rock and roll.
Well, Pepe, you ended up being sunshine for George and I'm in the middle of the dark Russian winter. Okay.
Exactly. All the best. Remember,
all the best, guys.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.